Hello and welcome to the official Hacks podcast from Max and Pineapple Street Studios. I'm Paul W. Downs, creator, showrunner, executive producer, and writer of Hacks. I also play Jimmy on the show. Joining me today are the two other incredible creators, Jen Statsky.
Hi.
And Lucia Aniello.
You know it.
Today we're joined by two very special, very important VVVIP guests. We have Carl Clemons-Hopkins, who plays Marcus, the brains behind Deborah Vance's empire.
Brains.
There we go. Carl, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And we have Johnny Sibilly, who plays Wilson, Marcus's love interest, who got away. Hey, Johnny.
I love it.
Oh, here we are, all of us together. Today we're talking about the 8th episode of Season 3 titled Yes and. It was written by Samantha Riley, Jen, Lucia, and myself, and I directed it. Dear listeners, this should be obvious by now, but if you haven't watched Episode 8, what are you doing here? Go and listen, unless you have a kink for spoilers. This conversation gonna be chock full. That means you, Barbara. And I just want to clue Johnny and Carl in. Barbara Streisand, we have learned, is a huge fan of the show and the pod.
Oh my God.
So, hello, Barb.
And
Scattered pictures.
that's not entirely what we call true, but we do
it's in
know.
my mind now.
We know she's listening to every episode of the podcast. Spiritually,
Oh my God.
and maybe literally. We don't know. We don't know she doesn't listen to every episode of the podcast.
Love it.
Because we know she does. So, episode 8, Yes and.
Someone made a supercut of some of your more problematic, older material, and it's gaining traction, and apparently some students are planning to protest your ceremony.
Oh, okay. Which minority group is upset?
Okay, not great that you have to ask that, and also, I don't think minority is the proper term anymore.
What are they called?
No, don't say they.
Oh, I thought everybody was they now.
That's a different thing.
It is a doozy of an episode. As you know, because you've just watched, it is an episode where Deborah is offered an honorary degree and she goes back to Berkeley, her alma mater, where problematic old material resurfaces and gets her in some hot water.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Marcus is in Palm Springs and he's there for Palm Springs Pride.
Being proud.
And for the Deborah Vance House of Vance activation, where we deal a lot with what it means to be a fan. And what it means to be at Palm Springs Pride. Two very important topics in the world of hacks.
If you need me to run the iPad so you can go catch a dick, please let me know.
No, I can't go there. I do not hook up with Deborah fans. It's too weird.
Right, don't shit where you eat ass.
Exactly.
We love watching you guys on camera together.
I know.
It's so fun.
And, let's talk a little bit about first, you guys, your relationship on screen together. The relationship of Marcus and Wilson has really evolved, especially into this episode. At first it was just like a nervous kind of crush kind of a thing. Then they hooked up, then they dated, and now they're here as genuine friends. They play trivia together and they hang out together. And I think that's so beautiful.
Oh, I think it's great. I think Marcus was, as we ended in season 2, very much in need of a friend. And the fact that this person they've already been through stuff together. You already know my mom. He's almost already part of the family. And so the fact that in this episode you get to see them just really interacting in that friendship level and in that so comfortably, I think it's really beautiful.
And you guys didn't know each other before Season 1, right?
No, we have some mutual friends, but this season 1 was our first real
Right,
meeting.
because you have such like an instant good chemistry for Marcus and Wilson. I would have thought maybe you had met, but no.
Carl makes it easy.
Oh, make it easy. It's an act. We're going to take it on the road.
Yeah. I mean, when I first read the script, I thought it was such a progressively queer thing for them to just move so easily into friendship. And, as a reader, as like an outsider reading in, I was like, I just get back together. Like, what's going on? Or stuff like that. But I thought it was such a mature thing for both of them to just decide that they were important to each other. And, even when Wilson's in Palm Springs and like, you do you and like catch your D, I'm like, that is really progressive and queer. Like, it's just, it feels very now. It feels, and I'm like that with my ex.
Oh.
So it felt like, yeah, I've seen that.
I've done that.
You've done that.
Yeah.
So, okay,
I
so you had
recommend
a lot
this
to draw
ride.
on. Your moment before was, let me think about my life. My relationship with my own ex.
Totally.
That's cool.
No, but it is so sweet. It's like Marcus and Wilson have this genuine connection, and even though the container of what the relationship is has changed, it's like that love and affection is still there, and it's really sweet. It's very mature.
Yeah.
They may be the most emotionally intelligent, mature characters on the show,
Dang.
I would say so.
Wow.
which I hadn't thought of till this
I was,
moment.
yeah, that relationship is the most. I think you're very right in that.
Yeah.
Because they balance each other out, and there's a mutual respect there.
Yeah.
That's really fun.
Because Jimmy's very emotionally intelligent, but he just surrounds himself
Ooh,
with
girl.
some interesting people.
Oh, man. You
It's
know,
like a glutton for punishment. Truly.
you know, the show in my mind has always been about, you know, a brave manager controlling, helping to manage crazy women. And, you know, I don't like to call women crazy.
Yeah.
But the facts are the facts.
But he wrote,
Right.
but he wrote them to be crazy.
Yeah.
I don't like to call him crazy.
Crazy,
I
but
make him
I
crazy.
make
on
that
page.
deliberately.
Again, I'm just drawing on my experience.
Write what you know.
Yeah. I would like to talk about Marcus's relationship with Deborah
Sure.
because it, you know, for a very long time before Ava came around, felt like it was clean.
Yeah.
They both knew what they wanted, and that was money.
Yeah.
For different reasons, but also kind of the same reason. They both kind of, I think, use money and success and these kinds of capitalistic ideals as a kind of armor.
Oh yeah, it's an armor and it's also a balm. I think because they're both coming from backgrounds where they were, I guess, put in positions where they were a lot wasn't expected of them, or you know, Deborah talks a lot about how, the view of women in comedy in the years leading up to when Ava came in, and what we talk about a little bit actually in season 1 as well is, you know, Marcus's relationship with his mom wasn't all that great, like when he came out and whatnot. Is getting better. He clearly was not someone who has, you know, a glittering circle of friends. That's changing now with like Wilson and his own boundaries and balances. But I think they both definitely use success as a kind of, I'll show you, and also as a way to kind of make themselves feel better about the decisions that they've been making in their lives.
Right. And once Ava then does come into the fold
Oh yes.
and starts to maybe change Deborah's POV of what she really wants and what she really needs and helps her kind of evolve in that way, that does, you know, shake the ground that Marcus is standing on.
Oh yeah, very literally. Now the pursuit is less the best way to win this capital success, and then now when Deborah's focus shifts to her actual work or actual art, you know, being a, I dare say, being a comedian again.
Yeah.
Because she was kind of just working at the Palmetto, and
Say
then
that.
Ava came in. And, Ava came in and was like, you know, let's lit that fire. And Marcus, who is very much not an artist without artistic goals or endeavors, kind of has to restructure himself. And I think a lot of season 2 was the imbalance of that restructuring. But this season, with the help of therapy and Wilson and all those other things, he's really kind of having to restructure himself again, and we get to see how that gets to play out this year. That's what I really love.
Really is the first time, and I think heavily because of that thing you're talking about, having other people in his life and the therapy and all these kinds of things, that he really takes it to Deborah.
Yeah.
He's kind of done all that work outside of her eye, and he actually stands up for himself in this episode in a way he never has
Oh my
before.
goodness.
Deborah.
I'm not going to make it to Pride.
What?
No, there's just too much going on, and, you know, apparently I need to lay low.
All right, I told like 200 gay men you were coming.
It's fine. They'll get over it.
No, they won't, actually. I told you this was important.
Marcus, I do not need this right now. This weekend has been a...
I want to hear it. Okay? I want you to hear me, but of course you don't because you don't fucking listen. You know what? Forget it. I'll cancel. Bye.
Well, he also, we see beautiful thing of these little seeds of leading up to that throughout the season, with like Deborah not really paying attention in meetings, and you know, the House of Vance was his idea. The solution to these third-party sellers or whatever is his idea, and so he's been, you know, slowly bringing these things to her purview, sometimes with attention and respect and whatnot, and sometimes not. And then this episode, it just kind of reaches a fever pitch, and he's like, he can't do that anymore. He also is very much reeling from the night before. Very much, you know, it's one thing to be challenged, another thing to be challenged while hungover and having dropped your own boundaries and mad at yourself and then taking that on her. So it's a ride.
Yeah. When you said, because you don't fucking listen, I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I felt like I was like, oh, wow, mommy's getting it. Like, you know what I mean? Like when a kid grows up and it's like you curse at your parent for the first time and it's like, whoa, what did I just do? Like, it was, But it also felt like as a viewer to be like, you know what? She needs to hear that. And as Wilson, I was like, finally.
I'm telling you to tell her.
Wilson has been a big part of that change.
Oh, huge.
Huge part. Because since season one, Wilson's been saying you need to have boundaries and this feels weird and, you know.
And relevant to this episode, Wilson is kind of the first person on the show who ever called out Deborah's problemative material.
Yeah.
That's right.
What? I think it was like 104, 106.
You did
it. That's right.
But also was always very, you know, respectful of your, like when you told him that story of like why Deborah was important to you, I think it was like, okay, I get that, but you have to draw a line where it's like you're respecting yourself. And, you know, even that scene where, you know, they like do the therapy thing, it was like, because Marcus didn't do the therapy, or like in that moment, it felt like it all comes out eventually. And that very pointed conversation on the phone felt like, that was bound to happen.
Oh, it totally bound to happen. From seasons past, we have all this history of how Deborah will respond to things at a whim, despite what the plan was, what the deck was. We have some stuff in season 1 where she misses a meeting entirely and comes in drunk. There's stuff in this season where she is quite literally on her phone in the midst of presentations and pitches and whatnot. So this is, like you said, this has definitely been building. It just needed time and opportunity to explode.
Yeah.
You know?
Now let's talk about the scene at the bar.
Yeah.
With Tim
Bagley.
A really beautiful scene played
so
wonderfully by both of you.
Oh,
and it's a scene where Marcus comes to terms with his own relationship with Deborah as an employee, as a fan. And also, you know, I think Tim gives the POV of other fans of hers, which is she can help people feel like they're at the top even if they're not at the top. And we always wanted to do an episode that talked about certain kinds of performers and why gay men especially gravitate towards them. So we really felt like the clashing of these two different stories, both her, you know, becoming extra famous this season, Marcus feeling behind, and then somebody else coming in and kind of giving a different perspective would then help Marcus kind of move forward with what he needs to do next in his life.
You can't stop being a fan now that she's got more of them. We loved her before anybody else did, and she loved us before anybody else did. That's not nothing. We just have to share her now.
Doesn't that make you mad?
No, it just means we were right all along. But nobody's ever gonna know Deborah like we do. She's a survivor, like us.
Well, she's always looking out for herself, so yeah.
It's an interesting kind of unfolding of the situation of someone who was a fan from teenage years. And sometimes when you're a fan of someone that long or you feel that strongly about someone, actually working with them is a completely different situation.
Oh, yeah.
And what we get to see, what I love in this scene and in just the general storytelling of this moment, I think Marcus is realizing that he can do one of two things. He can be Deborah's bitter employee or Deborah's fan. And for the sake of, I think, everyone involved, he's going to choose, let me just be a fan of yours. So I'm excited to see how exactly he cuts this.
It's sort of like it's an extension of Never Meet Your Heroes.
Yeah,
never work for your heroes for 22 years.
That's a great way to lose a hero.
Good. Yeah.
It's also such a beautiful tribute to the way that gay men interact with powerful female figures. You know, if you ask a lot of gay men, it's like, who's your pop diva?
Yeah.
You know, who's your person? And everyone has their own. And I always say, like, one of the reasons that I feel gay men gravitate towards strong women is because, one, women are usually not the ones in society that are, you know, treating gay men like they're less than. And, you know, sometimes you see like someone like Beyonce or Deborah or Britney Spears, and you think they have such magnetism on stage, and it kind of makes you feel powerful by extension. And I feel that, you know, Marcus being a part of this, you know, brand basically is almost identifying with some sort of power that maybe Deborah was giving him that he didn't have himself before.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such a queer experience. But I also feel the same way that, you know, you see your idols be very human and fall down and make mistakes. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not this person. I'm not, you know, they also are very human. So you kind of have to check in with yourself. And I think it's such a special moment to have.
Oh, it's wonderful. And it's also, I think, just a wonderful moment for nerds everywhere. Well, just because, I mean, he's this fan, yes, he's this queer individual, but he also kind of brought Deborah into the digital age. You know, he very really created the nuts and bolts of her finance dreams, if you will. In my head, Marcus's father is a veteran and an accountant, and very just... So he was probably very much.
That is so.
But that's.
What do we think, Robin? If Dad was a Capricorn, what's Robin?
Okay, all right.
What's
We're getting into it.
Yeah.
I honestly
the wonderful
think,
Angela Gibbs.
Brilliantly played by Angela
Marcus's
Gibbs.
mother.
Robin seems to me like either a Gemini or a Scorpio. I'm not exactly sure just yet.
Dang. Okay.
That's her notebook.
Okay.
But I think that, well, not I think, I know a good man's hard to find. And I know that Robin fell in love with a good man.
Yep.
And I know, it seems to me, based on who we see Robin to be now, that Robin did her very best to keep the good man, the good life, the quote-unquote ideals, those tenets up.
She was a savior, and she was this safe space as a way to heal from that trauma. And like you're saying, it's so hard, though, that then when those things aren't serving you, it's like that tie to them is really difficult to let go.
Of course.
It's very intentional that this conversation Paulucci and I had wanted to have in the show for a very long time.
It was almost in season 2.
It was almost in season 2. And I think it's great that it's in this episode because the A and B story of this episode is looking at art and looking at an artist and one group of people being like, or many groups of people being like, this artist has hurt me and their work has been hurtful. And then another group of people being like, this artist's work has been so monumentally important to me.
Sure.
And it's so interesting because I do think, to Johnny, what you were speaking of about how gay men obviously like gravitate towards like a Joan Rivers or a Kathy Griffin, oftentimes those women did material that was very problematic. And so it's like, it's this kind of interesting thing where one marginalized group is responding to it and finding like that they can identify with it, and maybe some other people are having a lot of difficulty with it. And it's just it's
kind of like what Ava was saying when she's like, it's not a value judgment on your entire being.
Yes.
It's just certain things that it's certain mistakes that you made.
Right.
And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, oof. That's so true, because it isn't just like you're a bad person. It's you did bad things.
Yeah.
And one thing I loved watching in this episode was Deborah being held accountable. You know, because this is why Jean is so great, is because you are also rooting for her when she says these things, because I don't know, there's like a familiarity with it. You're like, I know that person. I know they're not horrible, but I know they just haven't taken the time to look at themselves. And when she said,
I can't be woke. I'm exhausted.
I actually was like, now I kind of understand what some people in my family have said. And I'm like, oh, they've been here for so long. They feel like, I'm tired of learning new things. Just when you think you know it all, someone comes along to be like, you're wrong. And it's like, I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
I've been waiting to be right.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm supposed to be when I'm older and wiser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to
Sure.
finally get to be right.
Oh goodness, you're supposed to know what these things are by now. Yeah.
Right. It's one of the great challenges of like being a human being is that world keeps evolving and culture keeps evolving, and you have to keep listening to people, which is what the episode is about. You have to keep listening, and but it's exhausting. You know, when you're saying like when she says it's not a value judgment on your entire being, that line was incredibly important to us to put in, because as we talked about this phenomenon of cancel culture, whatever you want to call it, we feel we've lost a great number of our best comedians to defensiveness. Because what we've seen happen time and time again is when people have been called out for material that did not age well, and some people said, hey, this was not cool and this was hurtful, for whatever reason, and people can't separate it. They can't go, okay, they're just saying this one thing I did was hurtful. They're not saying that my entire being is evil and bad and I deserve to go away forever. But for some reason, a defensiveness really kicks up and people have difficulty doing that.
Especially for comedians who oftentimes are speaking truth to power, like a Deborah Vance. And when she says, I'm the first person, I got fined for saying abortion on TV. She's like, no, I've been on the right side in so many ways. Why am I getting, in trouble for these missteps? But it is like, well, these are just mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes. And if you can push past it and own up to it and engage and learn and be flexible, and yes, learning and being flexible is exhausting and it's hard, especially when you're older and you're calcified.
Well, it's also, it takes a huge amount of vulnerability.
Yes.
And it's more vulnerability than many people's egos would allow themselves to even, consider.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're a comedian and your work is speaking about culture.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then culture shifts, the context shifts, and your artwork is being attacked. It's not just like, oh, I said something. It's oftentimes like material you've worked on. You've written it. It's like your work and your worth then is getting attacked. So people freak out. I understand why people have that reaction, but it is like, well, no, you are so brilliant and you have spoken truth to power. Just push through it.
Right. It's sort of like what comedians are it's like they're being told they're bad at their job.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're not properly reflecting culture, and that's what it is. And so many comedians, when they talk about this, they're like, it's my job to say whatever. Comedians should be able to say whatever. And it's like, you should be able to say whatever if you are speaking truth to power and commenting on culture.
And are funny.
And are funny.
And also, there's a distinction, I think. Like sometimes people say things that are provocative,
Sure.
and also they play on stereotypes, but it's not like going to get them canceled if it's just doing that in a way that's not super harmful. You know what I mean? Like,
And
I
if
do
it's
think people can
funny.
do things that's like, especially if you're talking about your own culture. I do
sure.
think people do that to great effect because
Sure.
they're able to engage in that way.
Right.
This was the whole episode, actually, we should say, dear listener, Barbara, that we pitched this when we pitched the show.
Oh, dope.
And so we knew we wanted to do this episode for a long time, but we were actually afraid to do it. Was very hard to stick the landing, to be like, how do you wrap your arms around all of this stuff?
Yeah, sure.
And how do you not sound like a very special episode that's preachy?
Sure,
But how do you like say the things you think and also not come down too hard on anyone's side? Because even Deborah says, I was canceled. There was not a name for it.
Yeah.
And it is a thing that's like this whole phenomenon.
That happened when it starts happening to rich, powerful men.
Exactly.
Or the line, I don't have the time to go to Europe and wait that out.
Yeah.
That was brilliant.
I don't have any time. And I certainly don't have the time to stand here debating it with you. I have a Barolo decanting downstairs.
Deborah, I just think apologizing is the right thing to do.
It's so easy for you to say what's right or wrong. It's never that simple. One day you'll understand that.
Okay, let's talk about improv comedy.
Oh, I was going to ask what you guys have against improv.
Well, we
We
don't have
should
anything
say
against
nothing.
it.
No,
I
it's-
think it's a love letter to improv.
We should
No,
say we
it
did
is.
improv for many, many,
Yes.
many years.
Yes.
We met in a level, Paul and I met in a level 1 improv class.
That's
At
true.
the
The
UCB
origin
Theater in
story
New
of
York.
Paul and Lucia is improv.
Yes.
Saying yes and to
Yeah.
each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, we also met Jen through that comedy scene, even though it
and
wasn't
you took classes.
And you also improvised.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We should clue the listeners into the fact that also the warm-ups, the zip zap zop, the
Very
answer
real.
is no, was scripted.
Oh, good.
The rest of it, I was like, okay,
we have to.
Jean, I think you're going to have to do some warm-ups. And she said, "Oh, really?" But I think she really enjoyed it. I think she really enjoyed because it's theater, you know. They were doing it.
Warm-ups.
And
Theater
so
games.
what you see in the improv warm-ups is Gene Smart improvising with these kids
Oh my gosh.
and reacting to them in real time. And
Yes.
there is no
Yeah.
rehearsal. There is it's all real. It's all electric.
Yes.
And I think it's so
I think that's why it's so good is because it's not scripted at
Yeah,
all. It's
it
just
works.
You
The fact
gave
that she
them-
said-
yeah.
high camp,
High
high camp,
camp
Badada.
Badada.
We thought for a minute the episode's called Yes and, which obviously is called back when Ava said yes and, you know. But we thought, should we call it High Camp Badada? Should this episode be called High
flirting with
Camp?
it. We kept flirting.
But no one would
Also
know what that
works.
means, and it's insane.
Hi, Camp. Hi, Camp Badada.
Deborah, is it worth it?
This episode also has mine and I believe Carl's
Yes. Oh my God.
favorite performance of the season, which is Deborah saying,
Pineapple. Pineapple reminds me of another prickly subject. Pediatric AIDS.
and the way
The way she goes from improv class to charity fundraising mode in a split second, like the instant performance
Yeah.
of sorrow. Oh my God.
her
It's
entire aura
brilliant.
changes on the line.
Yeah,
It's on
within
the
it.
line. Yeah.
Oh,
Dear,
it's so
dear
good.
listener, Barbara, that is the hardest I've ever seen Lucia laugh on the set of
And she
Hacks.
did replay it many times.
I was
Yeah.
purple on the ground.
One of Lucia's greatest qualities is that she makes herself cry laughing. And by makes herself, I mean it's often at her own jokes.
Oh,
But
yeah, very much.
that being said, she's a
Okay.
great laugher and she will be moved to tears. And you were like bawling.
I was. It's an extraordinary performance because of Jean. Jean has such mastery of herself, of her instruments.
Yes.
But she did like 14 things at once.
It's
Do you know what I
it's
mean?
unbelievable. It really is incredible.
And it's so cringe ass, terrifying, butthole clenching insanity. I loved it. I will never not love it. Incredible.
It's just great for someone like me who loves a sad, funny combo.
You do love
I
a
really
dark
do.
humor.
I really
dark.
do. It is an
it's
amuse-bouche
so
of wonderful.
good.
So at the end of this episode, this article comes out. The New Yorker article, you know, Deborah's being profiled. And so we get to hear that article. Read so brilliantly by Hannah Einbinder.
Don't we love her?
What a reader.
A hack is someone who does the same thing over and over. Deborah is the opposite. She keeps evolving and getting better.
Honestly, it's hard to do what she was asked to do, which is just read an article. You know, she was just asked to do that. And we actually did a lot of takes in that scene. But she always gets me. She always really, I don't know, there's something about her delivery that really like I find moving. How did you guys feel about the article?
I thought it worked really well.
Great.
Yeah, at the beginning I was
Cute.
like, this journalist has an agenda.
Well, see, and I was like,
I
yep.
see through you.
Yep. Well, I was like, this girl has an agenda, and also, what is this takedown going to look like?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
how is she
Right,
going to
right.
take this person
That
down?
is the expectation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's what definitely the build up of the episode is like, oh, maybe this is a comeuppance moment. You know, yeah, inconvenient for Deborah, but who cares? But you know, the fact that she did take the time to tap into her vulnerability and listen and learn and be in a space of judgment, but ultimately improvement. I think that's what made the article so compelling.
Yeah.
And it kind of is just like it showed how the episode to be like what you could do in order to make, you know, because even when they're having the
Celebrities take
conversation with the
notes.
journalist, like, yeah, I loved your piece. I loved like just trying to placate.
Yeah.
And like, you know, journalism, like people in journalism are like, girl, we can see right through you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but then for all of the things to take place where Deborah finally comes to, you know, to take responsibility and all of that, it was just like how to.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Hey,
It's a playbook.
do
Yeah.
you find yourself a comedian? Do you find yourself with unfunny jokes? Maybe shut the fuck up and listen for a moment. and
Barbara,
maybe...
if you ever Streisand affected again.
Oh my goodness. And we should give a shout out to Shakira Barrera for her portrayal of Mina, the New Yorker journalist, because she did a great job of, I think, being I think, being appropriately intimidating, but also I think she was open and didn't really have an agenda. And it's why she ended up with the take that she ended up with.
God, watching her listen is so beautiful to watch. I'm a fan.
Yeah. And then, of course, the final moment of this episode is Deborah finds out that she got it.
I got it. I got late night.
I got late night.
She finally beat out the X Games guy, who we never name at all.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
And it is a moment that, we do feel, or we do hope is, really satisfying. The season is her endeavor to get this show, which of course is such a long shot.
Yeah.
But she works so hard. She puts her whole team works so hard. Yeah. And so, we feel like we hope the audience feels it's an earned moment and a realistic moment. And, it's the reason that Ava has put so much to the side, it was in pursuit of this goal. So it is a special moment that I hope that the audience gets to enjoy.
Because, I think for all the characters, I'm going to say all the characters, obviously for Deborah and Ava, but I really do think for all the characters, this show is about their quest for dignity. And we see a lot of underdogs and outcasts in this show. There's a lot of people that are cast aside and pushed to the desert and aren't really in show. But, we always say, sure, it's a show about show business, but it's really not. It's about like being on the outside of it. Yeah. Even for Jimmy and Kayla, who left this agency because they didn't fit in with the bro culture of this management firm. Like everybody kind of has their own means of feeling othered. And I think we don't get a ton of them, but it's nice to have a win. It's nice to have them.
Yeah.
And it's also been building up since season 1. As a viewer, you're like, oh, she didn't, that late night show didn't really work.
Yeah.
It's just so nice to see that like second chance.
Yeah.
And, they're all like hugging and, they don't hug. Like they don't usually do that. So it feels like it was. Really,
how did the
really
hug
nice.
feel to you? Because we talked about that too. Is that insane that they're hugging? But
no, it feels you're like a family at that point.
Yeah,
It's just even when you're a family that doesn't really talk about your feelings a lot, you still do feel, know, and that's a really exciting moment I think for all of them to be part of Deborah's journey in that way. Marcus wasn't in that, right?
Decidedly no.
I was. That was the only part that I was like, oh.
But Marcus is on a
But I realized why. And I was like, ooh.
I think he might be in Pennsylvania.
Well, either in Pennsylvania or Cabo. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows with Marcus?
We do call Roy in this episode.
Oh, I love it.
Roy, it's Marcus. Give me a call when you get this. I'll be coming to QVC next week, and I'd like to talk.
I love it because it's a decision's being made. That, but is he joining Roy? We still don't really know what exactly is happening with QVC. We don't exactly know what Marcus's A, decision is going to be, and B, how is he going to enact this decision, especially against the backdrop of Deborah's new life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only time will tell.
Tune in next week, dear listener.
And tune in every week.
Yeah.
Tune in every week.
Show.
Yeah.
Once you finish, start it again.
Well, you know what? They're listening, so they're already in. You guys are the real ones.
Yeah.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends, but damn,
right.
you rock.
Yeah, you guys rock.
Listen to episode 8 of the podcast. You rock.
Thank God for you.
Thank you so much for being here. We love you both. We love having you. We love hanging. We love hanging.
Anytime.
Thank you.
So that's our episode. This has been the official Hacks podcast with Jen Statsky, Lucia Aniello. It's just because I'm reading, I do know my wife's name.
Lucia.
I know her name. All right.
Keep her on her toes.
I think we'll keep that in. And me, Paul W. Downs. This podcast is a production of Max and Pineapple Street Studios. Our executive producers are Gabrielle Lewis, Barry Finkel, and J.N. Barry. Our producers are Melissa Slaughter and Ben Goldberg. Darby Maloney is our editor. This episode was mixed by Hannes Brown. Pineapple's head of sound and engineering is Raj Makija. And Pineapple's senior audio engineers are Marina Pais and Pedro Elvira. This episode was engineered by Javier Cruces. Special thanks to Kenya Reyes and Aaron Kelly and Michael Gluckstadt from the Max podcast team. You can watch new and old and all episodes of Hacks on Max. And a big special thanks to Carl Clemons-Hopkins and Johnny Sibilly for joining us today on the show. We'll be back next week to talk about episode 9, the season finale. See you then. Woo!
Ciao for now.
Lucia.
So fucking
Got it.
funny.
Damn, y'all are wifed up.